Welcome to the Sip and Scale podcast, where we talk about everything business, entrepreneurship, and startups. My name is Blendi Muriqi. I'm the CEO and founder of Delegate.co. Each week, you'll join us as we talk with industry experts and business owners, sharing actionable insights to drive your business forward. So grab your favorite beverage and let's sip our way to success. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Sip and Scale podcast. Today's guest is Louie Bacaj, a powerhouse who turned dreams into reality. Starting as an early engineer at Jet.com, he helped scale the company to $3.3 billion sale to Walmart. There, he became senior director of engineering. He has led teams that built pharmacy tech for over 100 million patients, generating $35 billion annually. Born in Albania and raised in the Bronx, Louie left a successful career to chase his entrepreneurial dreams. He's since built SaaS apps, created courses that sold over 1,500 times, and grown a dedicated social media following. So welcome to the podcast, Louie. It's a pleasure to have you here. You happen to have a similar story to me, Albanian upbringing, grew up in the Bronx in New York City, went from sort of rags to riches, or at least, we're striving for that. And it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for having me on, Blendi. I'm very glad to be here. Can't wait for this conversation.
Awesome, man. So I guess the first thing I want to talk, let's rewind, because there's a lot of people, they have an origin story and they go through life, they go through hardships and they come out on the other side. And for a lot of people that currently they're in a 9-to-5 job and they're trying to transition, become entrepreneurs, everyone has that transition story. I'd love to start by asking you just about your origin. How did you even start in the computer science space? How did you start in engineering? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, great question. I guess on this podcast, I'll start from the beginning. I grew up in the Bronx. I was actually brought over to the U.S. when I was 10. I was born in Shkoder. So we'll start from the very beginning. I was brought over to the U.S. in the Bronx. We grew up pretty poor in the Bronx. I mentioned where I lived in Fordham Road over there. And I worked in all kinds of jobs. I started working when I was 14 probably. And I went to school and worked. And I worked in a restaurant for close to a decade, probably from 16 until 26 or so. And that entire time in that restaurant, I put myself through school. I paid for college. I got a degree in computer science. But, sort of by the end of that restaurant career, I was doing really well there. I was managing the whole thing. The owner trusted me very well and he was scaling his business. He was opening multiple restaurants. When I finished college and I wanted to start this sort of computer science career, he was making me all kinds of offers. Don't leave. Forget about this stuff. And so I almost didn't get into this path. But around 2010 or so, I decided I spent all this money. I learned all this stuff. I should probably give this a shot. I've always been passionate about computers. That's why I got in that path. And I started applying for various jobs. I worked at a few different companies. Very quickly, I started working at bigger companies. Around 2011, I was working for a company that made market and credit risk software for big banks. I was a software engineer there, and I saw working with the banks that the engineers on the other side had it a lot easier. They were making way more money on the banking side. The grass looked greener. So I went to one of those roles at the banks. And then I found out that, okay, they pay you a lot better and it is a lot easier, but you're not learning, you're not growing. And so even though I was making really good money at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, felt like I was just basically had a very tiny slice. And I started looking for more. And that's how I found Jet. I was looking at startups. I was looking for ways to learn. And I ended up taking a sort of small pay cut to join this startup that had under 20 people, I think, at the time. And very, very quickly, that startup worked out. Call it luck, call it fate, call it whatever. But by the time Walmart acquired us, we had 3,500 people. 350 of them were in engineering. I went from this individual contributor, senior engineer, to a senior director there, just managing lots of engineering teams. It was basically, this cliche they say about rockets. You're on a rocket, you got to try to hang on, because every stage of this thing is different. And every stage you've got to hang on, because your job is going to change drastically, from obviously building stuff to managing people to all these other things. So I would say I really strengthened my chops at this startup. And then from there, Walmart acquired us, and I would say things were not easy, but much easier at Walmart. They put me in charge of the modern tech and pharmacy. It's a $35 billion business for them, like you mentioned, 100 million patients. And I was running that team, or those teams, during COVID, which, we had a lot of interesting stuff. tough. I mean, obviously it was critical stuff because it was patient medicine and things like that. So we got some stuff to chain. It impacted 100 million customers. It was an amazing experience. And then around 2021, the COVID started ending. The bureaucracy started kicking in the big machinery that is Walmart. And I mean, it's normal at every big company, basically. And so I remembered it from Bank of America, in fact. And it's basically the legal teams are keeping you in meetings. They're asking, in this state, we got to slightly tweak this way just because they have different laws than this other state. And so now you're spending all your time in meetings, 50 hours a week. And they were paying me really well for that, Frank. But I just said to myself, once again, I'm not growing. I'm not learning. And is this what I want to do with my life? And it's very prestigious, actually. You know, you're a senior director. You're running a bunch of engineering teams, but you're in 50 hours of meetings and maybe you say one or two things in those meetings. And I decided around September 21 that, look, I've always had this dream of entrepreneurship. I'm going to chase it. I'm going to give it a shot. And I'll get more into that later if you like. But that's when I decided that I'm going to quit this huge salary, this prestigious thing that all my family members were proud of me for. And I'm going to actually start a business. See how that goes.
I had a conversation with another Albanian American a few weeks ago, Gerta Madaj, and she had said the same thing.
I listened to that. It was great.
Yeah, she had said similar thing when it comes to the whole like going after status in terms of jobs. I think that there's that ambition for a lot of us to strive for status in the beginning, only to realize that it's not what truly makes you happy in the long run. And then once you realize that, you're like, okay, I want to take a deep dive and actually it is a risk, you know, to go from a great company, Fortune 500 company, to the startup space. How did you, on your end, because it is a big leap of faith and it is a big risk to start your own entrepreneurial journey, how did you de-risk? And one of the things I read about you is you went into real estate first, or you got dabbled in real estate before you transitioned into your SaaS company?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of cliches about entrepreneurship being about risk taking, but I've, over the last couple of years being in it and surviving in it, I've come to realize that it's actually about risk reduction. You know, it's actually about finding a way to survive and remain an entrepreneur long enough, do your best work, and to have something hit, you know, have something work out. And anyway, I guess I sort of knew that intuitively at some level that it's about that. And I think most people listening probably know that, right? Like you're not going to make the same kind of money and all these other things. And so I started around, right before I left the bank, actually, I bought my first sort of 2-family home, lived on one side, rented the other. I think it's a great way to kind of get started. I see a lot of people buying beautiful single family homes the moment that they're making money. And, you know, you're getting hit with taxes on that all the time. Albanians are actually really, really good at this here in New York, where they buy the multifamilies, they sort of live in one unit and the rest of it pays for, sometimes even gives them a profit. It's just an amazing thing anyone can do, but most people, they value the privacy so highly that they won't go through it. So anyway, I bought that first one and I said to my wife, I said, man, we're never going to buy a single family now. We're just going to keep doing this because, you know, and so I just went and bought the next one and then the next one. And, you know, I had a few of those and it's not like because they have mortgages, but they bring in enough money and they taught me a lot about business and what business actually is. They bring enough money. You obviously got to find tenants. You got to have your leases. You got to collect rents. You got to fix things. You got to manage the thing so it makes money. They bring enough money where my family has a roof over their head, even if I'm not working. I mean, it's not like it's enough money for us to live luxuriously, but it's enough money to just have a roof, just have food. And that to me is enough of a de-risk where now I could mess around in this world of entrepreneurship. I could try these other things. And I think, frankly, everyone has access to this. Like we mentioned our backgrounds that we grew up in the Bronx. I mean, I was dirt poor in the Bronx. I lived on Fordham Road. Fordham Road is not a great area. My whole life, it hasn't been a great area. And it's just poor, right? And so I grew up poor. And so for me to find the money to buy a multifamily like that, I bought it FHA. I put 3.5% down on my first one. I had nothing to lose. I mean, if I foreclosed on it, I would have lost whatever measly little bit I put down. But I think this path is actually viable for a lot of people to begin creating some sort of income for themselves. And then at some point, you know, trying riskier things like a SaaS startup. You know what I'm saying?
For me, when I graduated from high school, I had went to high school in Putnam Valley, an hour north of the city.
I know where I have some relatives there. I know where it is. Yeah.
Saying like, oh yeah, that's my cousin's cousin, right? I moved down to New York 10 years ago to go to Fordham University at Lincoln. And when that happened, my dad found me a super. Up until recently, like the last 10 years, I've had that super. I've lived in the building in Midtown for free. So when you're talking about like de-risking or reducing that risk, I didn't have the expenditures that normal New Yorkers had. So for me, it was, I had the ability to take outsized risks in starting a business because I knew at the end of the day, I could eat dollar pizza every day if I didn't have any money and I had a roof over my head. And the ability to do that allows you, I think, to start taking more and more risks. And then once you have a little bit of cushion, like you're talking about, out, it's a lot easier to make that leap.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that story. I mean, I think it's incredible, right? Like, you see all these tweets and things about how people spend thousands of dollars in New York City and Manhattan on shoebox apartments. I mean, they're paying thousands for like something that's smaller than my office here. And it's insane. And you got to live there for free amongst people that obviously have connections, have resources, and all kinds of things. That's an incredible thing. I mean, more people should seek things like that.
Yeah, it's hard to get a super these days.
It is hard now because there's a lot of us now, it's caught on.
I was telling one of my friends, I'm like gonna move out of this super eventually. I gave it to my dad, so he's taking care of it now. But I told my friend, she's like, the moment you don't want it, let me know. I'll take it off your hands. Hell, I'll pay you for it. I was like, wow, this is in demand. I think for a lot of people, having that cushion with anything in real estate definitely makes a difference. What I'm interested in hearing more about from you is the transition now. You purchased some properties, you have that cushion, you have a roof over your head. How the hell do you make that transition to owning your own business? What prompted that?
Like I said, I mean, at Walmart, the bureaucracy kicked in. And again, they were very good to me. I'm not trying to knock any of that. This is very normal stuff in a company. I guess they call it like peacetime. Once the COVID stuff was over, everything just started seeping in again, and just all kinds of roadblocks to get stuff out. Just have you talked to legal about this? And you just end up sitting on calls with these folks. And it just prompted me to say, you know what, if this is all life is, then I don't want to do this anymore. Employment life, And I decided, look, I'm going to chase this dream of entrepreneurship. I'm going to try to fend for myself. I'm going to try to do something. And I think I made a huge mistake when I left that job. And not for the reasons you think. I mean, of course, I left the money behind and they loved me and they begged me to come back and all these other things. But that's not the reason. I mean, the reason why I made a huge mistake is because I went down this path that most people like me, most people in tech are taught to go down, which is go and raise venture dollars, create a slide deck, go and raise venture dollars, start your thing, and that's it. And you're off to the races. And what they don't tell you about that is that, when you go and you raise venture, and which is exactly what I did, by the way. I got together with my brother and two other business partners, and we raised venture dollars. And we started this SaaS thing for estate management, and it wasn't making money. And I mean, we were months into this thing, and it's when you take VC dollars, now you have a legal, moral, ethical obligation to do the right thing by these people to try to get them returned. But you took that money pre-seed before you had anything with a slide deck, just based on the fact that they trust you and all this. And now you're in this situation where the thing doesn't make any money. You've taken their money and you need to find a way to get them in return. And you're eating ramen because it's not like you can pay yourself a good salary on this kind of thing. That money is for marketing. It's to try to find customers. And so you're eating ramen. You're stressed out of your mind because the thing's not working. It's a worse trap than big company employment at that point. And so it was a huge mistake. Yes, I was CTO of this thing. Yes, I had raised the venture dollars. On the surface, all this stuff looks prestigious, right? Like when you're doing the thing, you're stressed out of your mind. And truthfully, I almost gave up. I almost said, look, what's the point of this thing? And let me just go back to employment. And maybe that's all I'm built for. And anyway, because like I said, it wasn't working. It wasn't working in any way. It wasn't anybody's fault. It's just how business works. Sometimes you have an idea that's crappy and it's very difficult. I mean, they tell you to pivot and they tell you these other things, but it's very, very difficult to pivot when you have nothing that's working. And so you could stay there for years eating ramen potentially. So it's really not a good deal for founders. I mean, especially at that super early stage, I firmly believe now that VC dollars are not a good deal for founders. I mean, the VC makes money all the time. The founder makes money 1%. 99% of the founders don't make. And so it's how could that be a good deal for you as a founder? And business, as I learned with the real estate stuff, business doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be this, you make no money. You could actually make money in business. There's a lot of ways. And then, so basically, once I realized that this was not the thing for me, I went back to my partners in that thing and I said, look, I have to wind down my activity here. I'm going to help you guys, right? I don't want this thing to fail. If you want to keep going with it, keep going with it. But I have to try something else. Otherwise, I'm going to be forced to quit, go back to full-time employment, and then I won't be able to help you at all. And so anyway, I wound that down and I actually started placing small bets. And small bets is just this idea that you're going to try different things. My first small bet was a course. I built a course for software engineers. Again, just a brain dump of things that I would tell my engineers when I was managing. That was the course. And that course took me 4 days to put together. It made $60,000 that first year. It doesn't sound like an insane amount of money, especially when you come from Walmart, managing multiple engineering teams, this big business unit. You made that money on your own, and you made that money by spending 4 days putting something together. And it was a very interesting realization that business doesn't have to be this hard. It doesn't have to be this thing where you're killing yourself and eating ramen the whole time and making nothing. I mean, there's so many ways for you to extend your sort of entrepreneurial runway. You could take a little consulting. You could build more courses. courses, you could build small apps. And that's exactly what I did that first year. I pivoted from the venture-backed thing to just creating these smaller things that make money. And I'm still hopeful that one of those smaller things is going to get bigger. And that feels like a pretty good path to me. But in the very least, you're at least not eating ramen the whole time. And I think that's the key. I mean, you can't stress yourself out of your mind because you're not going to make your best work that way. I firmly believe that. So I probably made a pretty big mistake in that initial pick of business, but then I subsequently recovered, probably because I sort of had the safety of the real estate. I wasn't as pressed to go back right away to work, but I'm very lucky, I want to say, that I was able to pivot out of that and I'm still in this game.
Interesting that you mentioned the background having to raise capital,
Yep.
and now you're making these bets on these projects, which in some ways is analogous to a venture capital firm, the way they make bets in certain places, and there might be that one product that just goes to the moon. So you've kind of taken the approach of what a venture capital firm does in terms of the allocation of resources and time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you want to become a VC for yourself, right? I mean, the more you can diversify where your money is coming from, the better it is. I mean, it's just basic common sense stuff, but they want to try to convince you. And this stuff is relative, right, Blendi? Like if you think about someone like Elon Musk, for example. For Elon Musk, digging some tunnels is a small bet. Putting some money behind some research for some brain device, that's a small bet for him because he has so much money. And so for him, it's like, even if the thing doesn't work out, he's not going to go bankrupt from that, right? And so I think this is the way. But most founders, they think, okay, I got to build the brain device and I'm all in. And then, that's a huge amount of risk to take on and your odds are terrible. It could be devastating, basically, to go down that path. And so becoming a sort of VC for your own business activities, I think is very smart. Just staying alive because that gives you a chance to win,
Because there are entrepreneurs out there that they go through this thinking of, they have all these ideas that come to mind. They have all these different, it could be, I have this project, I have this project and that project on the side, and they become scattered. How do you ensure that you don't become scattered in like dividing your time amongst multiple projects? Or small bets, as you say?
Look, the thing is, the projects that are working out, it's very easy to see that they're working out and you can make a decision whether to invest more into that and to do more with it or not. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of these things, they don't even have to be done in perpetuity. I mean, I think a lot of software engineers don't think that they could put a course together out there and put it on a platform like Udemy, even if they don't have an audience. I mean, I didn't have a big audience when I put this engineering course. You could put it on a platform like Udemy. People are going to Udemy all the time and searching for stuff to learn. In fact, their employer is probably paying for it. So they don't even think I should take my knowledge, record it in this thing and sell it. But the thing about that, once you've sunk that time into that time is capped. Like it's going to take you a week, it's going to take you 2 weeks, it's going to take you a month, whatever it is, but you're done. You don't have to think about it again. That asset is out there living. Even when you're sleeping, it's still out there on Udemy's website. And so this is a very important distinction. And I think that's part of it. It's like trying to do things that you could place the bet, what your resources are that you're going to put into this thing, and you don't get burned investing more and more into it. Then it's no longer a small bet. Then we're back to the VC back thing. We're right back to where we started. But some things, do really well. And if something does really well, then you have the option. I mean, if you want to add more to it, like for example, that course did really well for me. So I ended up adding a couple of extra modules to it based on feedback. People literally emailed me and said, this was great, but I'm thinking about transferring teams. I'm thinking about getting into engineering from data science. How do I do that? And I thought, done that many times for people. Exactly. Let me just record that for you and add that as a module. So I had the option. I mean, I didn't promise anybody that I would do that. I had the option to add that and I added it. And so you always have this option, even with books, even with apps, with a book, you could revision 2 or whatever. You could add an extra bonus content, whatever you want. There's so many ways now. Things are living, breathing. You could choose to evolve them or you could leave them the way they are. And I think that's a good way to think about these kinds of things. And yes, I think you basically want to cap that downside, how much risk you can putting into this thing, how much time can you lose, how much money can you lose by doing this thing. And once you covered that, everything else is a lot easier, I think.
I think when it comes to, there's capping your downside, but then there's also you maximizing your upside. And one of the things that you have been doing recently is really optimizing your audience through writing and social media. How instrumental has X, Twitter been to your growth and the growth of the courses that you have?
One of the things that I saw at Jet, I mean, I learned a lot of stuff at Jet, but one of the things that I saw is I was actually building all the engineering stuff for the ad tech, for the marketing business, and built the bidding platform for the ads on Google and Facebook and feeds and all kinds of things. And one of the things that I saw is that, number one, ads are really expensive. Getting people's attention is really expensive. It was costing us so much money money a jet to scale the thing. And it's ineffective. I mean, it's getting less and less effective. You see it online, right? People are just allergic to ads. They don't work the way they used to. And sort of like relationships work. I mean, if people like you for you, look at Elon Musk is, again, not to keep harping on this guy. His marketing department at Tesla is him, right? Like he's always retweeting people that, Tesla saved their life or because he's good at crashes or whatever, right? He's always pushing good news about his companies and all of that.
Founder first branding.
Exactly. I think that those relationships are actually, they work. And so what's nice about X and writing and building even a small audience is that you can always test ideas, right? If you've done something for other people and you've been helpful to them, they'll always give you the time of day, even on a new thing that you're trying, and they'll try it. They'll give you feedback. And so for me, the real value of the X audience isn't necessarily that it's the place to make a lot of money, but it's a place to see if something works or not. It's a place to see what the reception is for this new thing, right? And a lot of the way things work is, crazy to say, but word of mouth. I didn't have a huge audience when I launched that engineering course. I didn't have a huge audience when I launched this newsletter course, whatever it was. But people took it and they got value and then they told other people. So a lot of the ways things still grow, even today, is just word of mouth. It's just people having a great experience with the thing. So what X gives you is it gives you that initial set of people, which is actually very difficult to get with ads. Then make a decision whether your thing is good or not. And if it's not good, whatever time you sunk into it, and you move on to your next project if it's not good. But if it's good and they tell other people about it, now you have this option to add more to it and do these other things. So I would say X and writing has been instrumental in testing out ideas. They start as, almost all of my ideas have started as, I'm going to write about this first. If people really like this, then I might do something else with it. Then I might build an app to help them. I might create the course to help. Whatever the thing is that I think is the best fit to help them with this thing that I just wrote about, that's what I'm going to do. And I think that's a really good sort of path for a lot of people today. And it's free. Of course, it costs time, but it doesn't cost money.
You've taken what a lot of big companies do in doing customer surveys and data collection. You're just doing it on a much smaller scale within a small community. And then from there, seeing, okay, these are the pain points that this follower has. This is something that I can build off of.
Yeah. There's this guy, Sahil Lavinia, who I really admire on Twitter. And, I took a course by him early on before. He doesn't do it anymore, but I think he's free on YouTube now. But I took a course by him back at some point in 21, I think, before I actually quit my job. And he said something really interesting. He said, if you have 1,500 Twitter followers, that's enough critical mass to see if something works or not. That's it. That's enough. You're going to get some kind of signal. And if no signal means it's not working. So it's just a very interesting idea, I thought, that, wow, even with something that small, it's still valuable. And so I thought, I could at least get 1,500 followers somehow if I keep sharing what I know. That was sort of probably the genesis of that thing. It's an asset that stays with you across companies, across projects, across all this. And it doesn't have to just be used for projects and for entrepreneurship. It could be used to get a job. I see people all the time that have decent sized audiences that have shown competence publicly, and they just tweet, I'm looking for work. And they get DMs and they get a job. It's just an amazing thing, I think, that we all have access to it. And the other crazy thing is we all have access to it and we think it's competitive. But in reality, a lot of people just don't bother to do this because they're afraid of looking foolish. They're afraid of the status stuff you talked about earlier, They're afraid of lowering their status by doing this. And these are the things that I think, give you an advantage. You do try this.
How instrumental has just consistency of being active on the platform? For me right now, I'm trying to grow my following on platforms like X, platforms like LinkedIn. And what I've realized is the difference between me being on the platform last year and this year has been night and day, just because I've put my head down and said, I need to be consistent with the value I put up front. And in the beginning, it's I don't even know what to talk about. And what I've realized is I just have to talk about the issues that I have on a daily basis, the solutions that I come up with for those issues. And there's going to be some people out there that have the same mindset as me and that will follow that content. So how has consistency played a part in the growth that you've had online?
I think it's really important, especially early on, because you need to build that muscle. And it takes time to build that muscle, because I don't think there's anything natural about putting something out there that 100,000 people might see. It just, if you think about it, it's a stadium of people, right, that are seeing this thing. And so you don't want to waste their time. You want to try to make it in such a way that the bar is a lot lower than you think. You don't want to waste their time, but even something entertaining is not wasting their time. People watch entertaining stuff all the time. And some people might think that's a waste of time, but a lot of other people think that's fun, that's funny, whatever. So I think, what can be considered as wasting people's time is for debate. But I do think the consistency builds that muscle, and you kind of get used to, number one, what works. Number two, the things that you could talk about that are authentic to you you. There's this great, I forget the name now, but there's this great saxophone player, I think, that said, it takes a long time to play like yourself. You need a lot of reps to get good at being yourself in this medium. There's nothing natural about it. You and I could have a conversation having coffee. It's very natural and it'll be completely authentic. But the moment we introduce 100,000 people around us, suddenly there's nothing natural about it. There's certain things that our minds are just going to try to block out because, you don't want to say that. You don't want to say this. You don't want to look foolish. And so it's very, very important to build that muscle, I would say. A couple of things. You mentioned the build in public. I think that's a really great way. I mean, just talk about the stuff you're doing. I saw this guy recently, running a garbage truck company, millions of views. I mean, people are interested. And so it's like decided he's going to start a garbage truck company. And I think this woman, Cody Sanchez, who's got a big audience, like put him out there. But it's very, very interesting. All kinds of people that do all kinds of things like this. People are interested. You work in a bakery, you work in a restaurant. People are surprisingly interested in all kinds of things. And so it's worth tweeting about the challenges that you faced. You're not just tweeting. I mean, it could be a recording of you walking around. It could be on LinkedIn. It could be anywhere you find more natural and that fits with you. But I think it's a really good way, just building in public. Another way I think is, and I did this early on quite a bit, is you want to list out the things that you've done in your life. You want to list out your assets, I would say, your skills and things you've done that you can teach other people. There's so many things that people have done in their life. I mean, everyone's done something, right? Like even if they were a parent and they raised a child, I mean, there are things that go into raising children, which is quite difficult. Jot those things down and then pull things from that you think that you've gone through that you think other people might benefit from, and lower the bar for yourself in terms of what you think other people might benefit from. You'll be surprised. And just give it out. Just tell people, look, this is how I did this a few years ago and I had this challenge. And I think that kind of stuff works really well. Just building in public regularly, talking about the things you're facing, and then just talking about the things you've done. I think the most valuable thing you get out of that is the relationships. You have access to incredible people right now. Think about it. 100 years ago, you couldn't just talk to Einstein if you wanted to, but I could reply to, I don't know, Elon Musk, or I could reply to whoever right now. And, he may or may not choose to reply to me. You could have a conversation with these people, which is pretty incredible. And then, Elon Musk is a bad example because, again, he has so many followers, but there are Paul Graham, I don't know, whoever. You could interact with these people. They'll reply. If you're thoughtful about the conversation you're having, they'll reply.
I had that realization actually a few weeks ago where we had a bunch of competitors come to our website. We do outsourcing services and provide virtual assistants and executive assistants to businesses. And we noticed that some of our competitors were coming onto the website and applying for positions as if they were applying for a job at our company because they wanted to see what our recruitment process was like.
Sure, what it looks like.
And different companies, they have different recruitment processes. They sell the top or they get the top 1% of talent overseas. And I had the realization, I'm like, why don't I just take everything that I know about recruitment and create a course module so people don't have to come to a company like mine? If they don't want to come and pay for a service like mine, I'll just give them all of the education for free. And if they get overwhelmed through the process, which many of them will inevitably get because it is a process, they'll have that good faith with me. So I've had that realization over the year that everything that goes on within our company operation, record it and make it a lesson or just a tidbit of information, of value that I can provide to anyone that wants to listen. And that's been immensely powerful because there are people out there that will then say, well, I got a lot of value out of the content you put out there. I don't have the time or the resources to actually invest in recruitment. Why don't you just do it for me? It's a perfect partnership and relationship to have. And I don't see, to go back to your point on advertising, that same dynamic does not go on in the advertising space.
It's impossible to do that with advertising, right? Like I think so many things come to mind with this one. Just basically you're establishing public credibility that you know the thing. People now have no doubt that you know the thing because you put the information right here for them. And just like you said, I think back to Walmart, right? Like, in the front aisles, you walk into the store and the stuff, they make no money on some of those things. They're just there to get you into the store. And it's just a very interesting, the way that they call these loss leaders, for a reason, right? And so they're getting you into the store and maybe you buy something else, maybe not. And you appreciate that this thing is so cheap here. And you go there and you buy it all the time. And I think it's the same thing with stuff like this. I mean, it's obviously a very different kind of domain, but you are giving people the knowledge. The people that want to do it themselves, great, let them do it themselves. And the people that scale above a certain point and they realize this is too much for me, they can hire you. I think that's such a wonderful way to do this by, first of all, giving. And you think you're hurting yourself in some way by doing this. Many people think they're hurting themselves. It's the exact opposite, actually, which is very interesting.
There's been a figure in the business influencer community, Alex Hermosi. This statement always sticks with me. It's give away the secrets, sell the implementation. And I think that you see that now with a lot of kind of founder first brands, that they're just giving away all the information that they can out there to build goodwill with a potential customer. And then eventually, if they need, in Alex Hermosi's case, he's giving away all of this information so that people can grow their businesses. And once they grow to a certain point, they can then go to him and say, hey, I want you to acquire a portion of my company and help me scale to the next level. It's a genius strategy that I think it'll be the future of advertising and marketing as we see it. We're in that period right now, but as companies are bidding for advertising space and people's eyeballs, it's not going to be economical anymore to do traditional marketing and go out and advertise. We're seeing that on our end at Delegate. There's thousands of competitors, and the cost per impression, it doesn't make sense economically. So we're asking ourselves, how can we build our organic marketing campaigns to a point where people, they just come to us because they know that we're a trusted source of recruitment knowledge or hiring overseas.
I love that example with Alex, with giving away the secrets. I would say, there's the direct conversion, right? Which is, okay, I gave you the secrets, you see the thing, and now you decide, oh man, this is actually harder than I thought. I want you to do it for me, right? That's sort of the direct conversion. But I would argue there's another aspect to this, which, people rarely talk about, the goodwill that you're building up with the person that doesn't convert. I mean, even, like I mentioned, that's an asset that stays with you even beyond this business now, because you gave them something that they needed at that point in time. And a year later, when you're putting something else out, you have some other idea or some new service or some new thing, that person will give you the time of day now because you helped them when they needed it. And so I think this is a really interesting aspect of this sort of audience building game and this whole thing we were talking about before. And that you're building up this goodwill, you could tap into it. You could ask now for help when you have the new thing. You could get some eyeballs on the new thing and you could know right away whether it works or not. And so I would say the direct conversion is awesome, right? When it happens. So basically you watch the thing and you realize, I need your help. But even if it doesn't happen, you still left a great impression on that person's mind by helping them. I want to say that doesn't just go away.
It's also, it has a network effect in the sense that if the value is so immense, that person is going to be willing to share it with someone else. So it may not be a direct conversion there, but it might be an indirect conversion in that you're sharing that with a friend, a colleague, and then that person decides to, have a direct relationship with you or your business. And that's where it goes back to how businesses always run. It's word of mouth. The businesses that have the most longevity, they're the ones where you say, hey, we're both in the Albanian community. When we need a plumber or a painter or an electrician, it's like, oh, who do I call? I call my cousin's friend Johnny down the street because he does a good job. He's a referral. That same dynamic applies in this space that we're in, branding ourselves and branding our products online.
Absolutely. I think it's totally worth it. It's worth investing into, even if you have no product. And it's definitely a long-term game, right? I think that's also part of it. I think people get into this and they want to see the results right away. It's just not how it works, right? They make the mistake of thinking that, oh, it's not working because I'm not getting any likes or I'm not getting any retweets. But you need to get good first. You need to be helpful first. You need to find the things that are most helpful to other people. And it's not easy to know that up front. The other people get to decide that. And it's very difficult. And so some people decide, look, I'm not going to keep going with this because I'm just not seeing the results in X amount of time or whatever. So I do think there's an aspect of this where you have to enjoy it. Otherwise, it's tough to see the fruits of it.
There's also the aspect of it where you have to actually be able to do the work beforehand. If I told you, Louie, let's go back in time 10 years ago, I don't think that 10 years ago you would have been able to provide the value you provide to your audience now. So I think there's a lot of people that they're in the space where they want to be a business influencer or some sort of online influencer, but they haven't done the work in whatever specific arena they're trying to talk about. Give an example of the person that wants to talk about SaaS companies and they've never run a SaaS company or they have never even attempted to do it. There's also a part of it where in order for you to provide value upfront to the person, you have to have some background or experience experience, I think it doesn't have to be a very long time, but you have to have some sort of experience in order to provide people value.
Yeah, I don't know who said this, but I know I must have read it somewhere. But basically, I think you need to be doing interesting things in real life in order to be interesting online. It's true. To have things that are meaningful to talk about with other people, you can't just be online and think that's enough. I think the experiences that you build up over time, the assets, the relationships, all these things impact the things that you talk about. And I think you touched on that very, very well.
Let's just kind of wrap it up. What are your future plans the rest of 2024? What are some of the projects that you're working on that you're really excited about? And then the last thing is, tell us where anyone that doesn't follow you online, where they can find you online.
Sure, absolutely. Well, so future projects. I want to place a few more small bets this year before the year gets away from me. Like, I think I want to build a couple of tools. I'm thinking about building a few with my brother. There's a few I have in mind right now. One tool I'm building right now is this sort of daily challenge tool. It's actually some very small thing, but connected to what we just talked about. Some people want to get started tweeting, so they set up a tweet 30 days in a row or whatever, post 30 YouTube videos. And we have a lot of people in this community, small bets, where they do things like this, where people want to, start something new and they don't know how to do it. And this will give them the daily motivation and the check-ins and to build that habit and get going. So this is the tool. It uses a little bit of AI to give you the motivation. And then the AI checks in with you at the end of the day to make sure you did it. But this is just one thing. I mean, I want to build maybe 4 or 5 more of these this year. And we'll see if any of them will sort of take off and if any of them will make money. But I will definitely try a few of these this year. So that's sort of my plans for the year. I think in terms of people finding me, I'm on Twitter. I'm building a lot of this stuff in public, so I'm talking about it pretty regularly. It's at Bacaj, Bacaj on Twitter. And, that's probably the best place to start because I'm very, very active on there. I'm a little less active on LinkedIn just because I think the project types that I'm building are a little bit different with some of the big companies and things that are going on LinkedIn. So, maybe someday I'll have a big company too. But until then, I'll be tweeting. And so I think that's a good place to connect with me if anyone would like to talk anything, basically.
Well, the last thing I'll say is speaking to like product market fit. I know that I had a group chat last year with a bunch of friends and we would put like day one because our goal was to work out every single day for the next 9 months. So we had a little group chat and it's like day one in, day two, and we would record our attendance at the gym and hold each other accountable to it. So when I hear about being consistent on Twitter or X, I'm like, that's going to work really well in keeping people consistent.
I think, what's interesting right now with AI and some of these tools, and my brother is pretty big in that space. He's also on Twitter. There's a funny story. He actually told me when we left the venture-backed thing, he said, I'm going to spend 30 grand and buy some graphics cards and I'm going to start training models in my basement. And at the time, 2022 or whatever, I thought he was crazy. I said, what is wrong with you? You're like, we don't have that kind of money to burn. And he did. And it's worked out beautifully. The guy's a genius. He's got like all these models that he's training himself and fine tuning and all kinds of stuff. And he's been building quite a large audience on there. But so I want to include some of those elements into this. Now imagine, what you said, but there's somebody else in that chat that's a bot that's replying and, congratulating you. I mean, imagine he's got David Goggins' personality, and it's hyping you up, And so this is my mindset with this tool, my vision for it. But I have no idea what's going to happen. Again, it's a small tool. I'm going to sink maybe less than a month to build it. And I think this is a good approach for people listening. It doesn't have to be with tools. I mean, you could take this approach with almost anything. Just try to cap your downside. I think that's the biggest thing. And then, the upside will take care of itself. If it works, you could always add more. That part's very easy. I mean, I see people get very stressed out about the upside, but it's actually the downside you need to worry about.
Well, it seems like there's only upside for you in general speak. It looks like you've got it down. I admire you. I appreciate you getting on the podcast, and hopefully we can have some future conversation.
Absolutely, Blendi. Thank you very much for taking the time. I love chatting with you, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Awesome.
We'll check in again.
Thank you. For everyone watching, thank you again for joining the Sip and Scale podcast. We'll see you next time.